Welcome to the meeting, everyone. My name is Amrita White, and I'm the clerk to the committee. The first order of business is to elect a chair for this municipal year. Do members agree to appoint Councillor Sanderson as chair?
Agreed.
Oh, agreed.
Thank you. I'm now going to pass on to Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Amrita, and thank you everyone for your faith in me for another year. So I'm going to start this municipal year by reminding everyone of a few housekeeping points. So please keep your microphones muted unless you are speaking. Please, as much as you can, wait until I call on you before speaking, and please can officers introduce themselves when they first address the committee. Lovely. Okay, I'm going to move on to item 2, appointment of co-opted members. Do members agree to appoint Stephen Whaley-Cohen and Miriam Shea as non-voting co-opted members for the 2021-2022 municipal year?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Perfect. Congratulations to you two. Nice to have you back. Item 3, apologies for absence. Apologies for absence are received from Matt Rumble from the officer side, but no one from the committee. Item 4, roll call and declarations of interest. I will now do a roll call to confirm the members are in attendance. When called on, please say present and note down any declarations of interest. So, Councillor Donovan?
No, I've got no declarations of interest.
Lovely, but you are present, so very good. And Councillor Rowbottom?
Present, no declarations.
Lovely, brilliant. Okay, item 5, minutes of the previous meeting. Do members approve the minutes of the meetings held on the 24th of March 2021?
Oh, can I just comment? Sorry.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Sorry to be a bit pedantic, but I think we had a little bit of a conversation over that. The row 7.2, there was very little difference in the pricing of the sort of all singing, all dancing version and the sort of ordinary version. I think that was discussed. I just wondering whether that could be reflected in the minutes.
Let me.
I haven't described it very well.
That's okay, so I'm just scrolling down to try and find. Sorry, what was this referring to?
Oh yes, I think it's 7.2 that I think we all commented that there was very little difference in the price of having the road done for a 5-year period or 2 years from memory. I think we all commented.
So the road, oh yeah, that's fine to have that reflected. We did have a discussion about it, so that road thankfully has now been recovered.
Great.
Yeah, but I'm sure we can note that conversation.
Thanks.
Thank you. And Stephen.
I've got one, I think, correction and one question. Where it talks about the review of the management, the new maintenance contract, the minute says that Emma Ranson be invited to join. That should be Miriam Shea and Emma Ranson be invited to join, I think. Certainly, I believe Miriam is involved in the subgroup.
She certainly is, so yes, that can be updated to reflect that.
And my question is earlier, I asked about the treatment of the rental income received in respect of the Pony Centre, and Chris Harris did come back to me a few days later and said that it had been paid to central borough funds, I forget the exact amount, and asked whether I thought that the account should be changed to reflect it. And I said I thought it was not material. It was about £6,000, if I remember correctly, but that it should be probably dealt with before next year. And it said that a formal response would be circulated, and I think it would be really helpful to us to have a formal response, how many years the money's gone to central borough funds, whether that's correct or not correct, and a proper report, basically.
Thank you. Was this the email that we had from Amrita sending through the answer to this? Because I know I saw that email. But yes, agreed. This might be something that's picked up at audit, but I don't know if Chris is on the call, but if not, Carmen, maybe this is something that we could pick up at audit and make sure that the money is going to the right place.
Yeah, yes, through the chair. I have spoken to Chris and he expects to give a formal report at the next meeting.
Oh, lovely. That's good.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Thank you. Is there anything else on the minutes? Otherwise, I'll be broadly happy. Good. Right. Let's take those as agreed. Please nod enthusiastically if you are agreeing them. Good. That's very good. Nodding, Miriam. Thank you. Lovely. Okay. Moving on to item 6, Manager's Report. Can I ask Steve Hollingworth to introduce this item, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Several items on this evening. The first one is Kensington Dragons, and members will recall back in July 2020 we had a special meeting actually to agree the way forward with the Dragons, and that included talking about the leases and documents we required, and it was delegated to officers to basically implement the recommendations and to move it forward to completion. We've done that certainly with the lease and the service level agreement, but unfortunately what we failed to do is ask for delegated powers to complete the grant agreements, which is part of the lease. So we have been moving that forward, so that's virtually complete as well. But as it's 250,000, the committee need to formally delegate that to officers so we can complete that. So it's been an oversight really, but we once we have that approval, subject to your agreement, we can then sign the documentation with them.
Thank you. I am certainly happy to agree that. Is everybody else? Again, lots of enthusiastic nodding. So let's take that as agreed. Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
The next item is the master plan for the scrubs. And we're all aware, I think, that we originally consulted on this back in the autumn of 2019 now, sort of before the pandemic. And as we all know, since the pandemic, in COVID times, we had considerable increase in footfall on the scrubs. And as a result of that, a lot more interest in the scrubs from the wider community and the educational sector. And I know last time we were keen to move the master plan forward and get it complete, but I think with this additional increase of community interest and educational interest, I think it would be very helpful, I think, to widen the consultation again, to get greater engagement before we finalise the plans. So that's the proposal, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. This is something I've been banging on about quite a long time, so I'm obviously a supporter of this. This is the committee to approve. So, as I say, I feel like, as Steve has very adequately outlined, I think given the interest in the scrubs, quite rightly, over the past year, it feels important to make sure that we are going out to the community and making sure that they're all really on board with what we're doing. We have had a number of submissions from community members over the past few months saying that they'd like to have a further say or like to have further input into the master plan. And I think given the amount of money that's involved and the scale of the project, I think that's the right thing to do, given everything that's happened over the past year. I know there's a real appetite to get on with things, and I think we're still being very mindful of that, but we want to make sure that we're getting on with things in the right way that's got community backing. So, Stephen, I can see your hands up, so would you like to start?
Thank you. Yes, I understand the need for further consultation. I'm a little bit concerned with spending more money on the consultation, and I know it's HS2 money, but what we spend on consultation, we can't spend on implementation or subsequent management. So I hope that the cost will be kept within reason. And secondly, and really more important, I think reflecting a considerable degree of impatience amongst many people, probably including those of us on this committee, at the time all this has taken, and certainly with the Friends. And wondering,
Stephen, sorry, Stephen, this might just be me. I'm struggling to hear you a bit.
Okay. I'm concerned with the timeline, and are you hearing me better? Can you nod if you're hearing me better?
That's a bit
and the impatience which members of this committee have already kind of expressed, but certainly a lot of friends of the scrubs have expressed that this is all taking forever, and we do need to get on with implementation in the right season, whatever that may be, depending on what's agreed. So could we have an idea of what the timeline from here might be, please?
Yes, I suspect that once we've thought about consultation, we'll have a clearer idea of that point. But Steve, do you have anything else to add to that? Or you're on mute.
Apologies, Chair. I think I understand the need to move this forward. I can't give you an exact timeline tonight, but I will be able to once we've spoken to LUC and perhaps specialist community engagement people to see how quickly we can engage with them and then circulate that information to the trustees. But I do understand the need to move this forward as soon as we can.
Could I just add one more point on the timeline while, you know, seconding everything that's already been said, which I also have a specific concern as to how the implementation of the master plan and the associated maintenance of what's done in the master plan that will fall under the master plan contract jibes or not with the broader scrubs maintenance contract. And I think we need to be very careful of trying to keep those two things in line so we don't end up with things kind of, you know, falling between the cracks.
I think that's quite right. That's a good point. Thank you. Councillor Rowbottom.
Thank you. I'd be pro extending the consultation, and in particular I had an idea perhaps we could have something on the signage that we've got entry points to the scrubs, which you've already agreed, like a QR code that would take people to register their interest in the scrubs or essentially put themselves forward, even just for minimal consultation, just to give some feedback. But I think that's possibly in times where it's challenging to hold public meetings, it would be good to catch as many people in person, but via that method, so that we sort of broaden out who we're consulting with as much as possible, and maybe schools as well, as children might not have mobiles, but do something like that so that we can actually catch quite fairly people who are coming to the scrubs, which seem like primarily the group will want to involve.
Thank you. Okay, so this is for committee to approve. So our committee in favour? Happy to approve? Good, thank you. All right, Steve, back over to you.
Yes, the next item is an update on HS2 and the timeline really for the work. We are now, well, HS2 are now working to secure access from the old Common Lane. And it has been delayed around identifying where the utilities are, and utilities are quite keen that they don't damage anything coming on from that road. So investigative work has been undertaken. They now need a Schedule 4 from Ealing to access, which they are securing this month. And so they are proposing to start work in July on the access. And then the road will be done in August. And then they will actually get onto the sewer work in September. That will be finished, they tell me, by April 2022. And then there's reinstatement for 2 months until the end of May. So that's quite quick as long as they stick to their timetable. So reinstatement will be finished by May 2022. On the UTX site, which is the land adjacent to Old Common Lane, again, the work will start in August, and they will create the shafts and the bore work for the utility work, and that'll be finished by February of next year, 2022. There'll then be a bit of a gap because they need to do work, they tell me, north of the scrubs to facilitate accessing the shafts for the utility work. And therefore, they won't restart the utility work on the scrubs until May 23. And again, they are predicting to be finished by April 24. This is the latest timetable. I only had this updated 2 weeks ago, so they seem pretty confident on that, and they think they will have the station finished by the end of 2029. So that's the latest work. I think part of the actions from last time was whether we could have the matting moved from Braybrook Street, but they're telling me they still need access until that road is completed in August. So then they will come on from Old Upcommon Lane, and that matting can be removed.
I think there's understandably concern from residents that they might still try and switch back and use the Braybrook Street route at some point. So I think if we could make sure that we've definitely got that confirmed from HS2 that that's not something that they're going to be pursuing, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, certainly. And the second part is just an update on the protesters. So as members will know, there are still on the scrubs in Chats Paddock. There's 2 camps, one adjacent to the fence line and one further to the east in Chatswood, in Chats Paddock. The council, HS2 security and the police do meet fortnightly now just to review what's happening. I last visited the protesters on Thursday of last week with the fire brigade, and we did talk to them who were there. It was Thursday morning. There were 2 in the main camp and 1 in the secondary camp. The fire brigade had a look around as well and were not concerned there was any danger to life because they do have sweeping powers, but they didn't think their powers were met the test, so that they went away content. And that's where we are. And I did speak to the protesters and ask them what their intentions were. They always tell me they will be leaving shortly, but they are still there. So that's the update, Chair.
Could I add one other just sort of question on that? I think there are ongoing concerns among the Friends that HS2 are being sort of heavy-handed, shall we say, or more than heavy-handed, going above and beyond perhaps what is necessary in terms of their vegetation clearance, I guess, particularly when it comes to the UTX site. So I just wanted to know sort of to what extent are officers still monitoring what HS2 are doing within their compound or compounds and around the edges?
Yeah, officers aren't there on a daily basis anymore, but we certainly are there on a weekly basis. And you're right, they are maintaining the vegetation because it is growing back, but it's clearly at a lot lower level. And when we're there, we do talk to them, but they don't have ecologists there with them anymore. But it's mainly just keeping the vegetation, stopping it growing back.
Thank you.
On that point, Steve, is it likely that there will have been animals and creatures and things that have moved back into the vegetation that's been cleared?
Well, there's always a possibility of that, but with people, because they are there every day, one would have thought that they would move away from that area. And the fact that it is open, they could come back, but it's more likely they would move to more quieter areas from where the work or certainly the security are there on a daily basis, and yeah, they're maintaining the presence there. So. But yes, there's always a possibility.
Yeah. Is it worth asking HS2 if they'd be willing to get someone down to go and have a look, just to make sure that they're not doing anything that they shouldn't, and maybe getting Seb up to go and have a look around as well? Just, I'm not suggesting weekly, but just to make sure that we're not doing anything that, although they're not clearing anything that they shouldn't be.
Yeah, certainly, and we could get a statement on exactly what they're doing it and how they're doing it.
That would be brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on point 4? Fine. Point 5, Park Lodge.
Yes, this was an action from last time, Chair, and I'm going to bring in Heather Marsh, who has carried out some work on this. So Heather, if you're on the call, can you cover this one?
I am on the call. Can you hear me?
You can.
Sorry, you can. Great, that's wonderful. Right, yes, thank you, Steve. Yes, Park Lodge. Following the last meeting, we commissioned a survey and some draft costs on options for Park Lodge. The building is in a poor state of repair. There's a brief summary of costs and potential income and financial implications in Appendix 1 to the meeting papers. So briefly, the options were short-term repair. The building probably needs short-term repair in any case, and that would perhaps give a year or two to decide on what further should happen to that building or that site. There's an option to redevelop on a similar footprint to provide a couple of new maisonettes. So they could be, for example, key worker accommodation, or they could be let at market rent. Could be redeveloped to provide a community space and with residential accommodation perhaps above. So that's another option. And finally, the building could just be demolished and returned just to open space. So I don't know what the trust feeling about that is. I mean, I'm guessing it's not going to be a straight yes, it's option this. So if you would like to consider that and get back to us with your thoughts, then that would be very welcome.
May I make a couple of comments on that?
Oh, yeah.
So I think that, well, to me, it doesn't seem to be within the remit of the Wormwood Charitable Trust to be providing housing as a first point. Secondly, I think having that sort of built structure on the Scrubs is, again, sort of counter to the ethos and indeed counter to the Wormwood Scrubs Charitable Trust Act. In terms of having a community centre, I think and plus accommodation above it, I think there are two issues there. One, I mean, the costs look pretty high, questions on that basis. And secondly, and this might be something to pick up later or at a different time, there is already a community centre on Wormwood Scrubs. It just happens to be a community centre that the community don't seem to have any access to. Those are just my initial thoughts.
Thank you.
Stephen?
Yes, just adding to what Miriam has said, the trustees of the Friends, without having had a chance to consult with Friends generally, felt that it would be quite wrong to undertake major building work, and the economics of option 3 make no sense at all. The community centre, there is a very strong underlying concern as to what has happened over the last decade or two. The community centre was built, it was given in some way which has been concealed within commercial confidentiality and not disclosed under freedom of information to the Peabody Housing Association, who do not allow access. And when they rent it to anybody, they charge a frankly outrageous rate for it with impossible conditions. So it wouldn't hurt for someone within the borough to do a note on what happened over the last 10 years or so to allow that to happen. That's separate from this decision. but the strong preference in the discussion last week of the trustees was for option 5, not to spend any more money on a building that shouldn't really be there, is contrary to the Wormwood Scrubs Charitable Trust Act, and would be much the best to return it to green space.
Thank you, Stephen. I should say I have had a number of emails over the past year, I think, with the uptake in use for the Scrubs of some kind of community centre with a loo and a cafe as well. So I've had a lot of emails for that. So I think it's worth, whatever we're doing, I think we need to take it out to the community and see what the feedback is, because I think there are a lot of different views about what it could be. I think I'd also be interested in seeing what the costs were if it were a kind of an ecology community space with the loo and maybe community cafe, not with the residential building on top. I mean, I was saying to Steve Hollingworth when I was looking at this earlier, I don't know anything about building other than what I've seen on Grand Designs, but that does seem like a very high figure for building a structure. So it would be helpful to get more of an idea of costs around that. Belinda? Sorry, Councillor Donovan.
Oh, hi, don't worry. The fact that there's a Peabody is, I remember in my old ward there was a Peabody Osram Court, and I used to have a lot of dealings with Peabody a long time ago. But if somebody, just to echo in there, someone could have a word with Peabody, because I've been a councillor for several years, and everyone has always asked for after-school clubs, for a community building, and for somewhere to go after school, whatever, and that's always been such a great priority. And it'd be wonderful if I know it's incidental to this conversation, but if somebody could have a word. Thank you.
Could I just add one more point, sort of picking up on that? I think we're sort of, I'm certainly of the view that there should be sort of provision of some sort of facilities, loos, and maybe a cafe, but I would say that the Linford Christie site is a better place for them than that particular corner, particularly as that is, people would have to traverse in some, either on a path or not, the sort of most environmentally sensitive area of the Scrubs. So it doesn't seem like a sort of natural place for it.
Thank you. Right. Councillor Rowbottom.
Thank you. I would agree with you, Councillor Sanderson. I'd be quite pro some hybrid of community space and residential. I know we've spoken in previous meetings about who the residential space could be prioritised for as well. I think it should benefit the Scrubs and users as much as possible as a space, but it probably does all come down to costs and what would be most effective. Don't want to be sort of sentimental for the sake of it about the site, but at the same time, if there is a demand for space for people to use recreation, that sounds good. I take Miriam's point about where this sort of that would be best placed, or potentially two. I'm also thinking about revenue streams to compensate for the kind of unavoidable impact of COVID and loss of parking revenue, etc. So I think we can probably combine something commercially sensible with something with community benefit with that third option potentially.
Thank you. How do we take this forward? Is this something that well, first of all, could we have some revised costs, just for my own interest, about whether this 708,400 figure is accurate, and whether there is something that we could do for a lot less that's, facilities.
Yes, Chair, we can drill into the costs, and we can look at a cost without residential, to get some more information for you.
Yeah, thank you. I am also aware, this unpleasant topic, that there has been an increase in people going to the loo in the woods and in different places, and I think it would be really good if we did have facilities as quickly as possible to try and stop that from happening. So not very nice for anyone to have to deal with. So I think anything that we could do to provide facilities, I would be in favour of, for the use of everyone on the Scrubs. But yeah, if we could have some costs sent back, that would be helpful. Maybe we can have an email conversation offline, and then talk about this at the next committee meeting and think about options then. Lovely. Thank you. Okay, on to the next item.
Yes, Chair, that's me now. That's the law enforcement team. So we normally have a community safety update on the scrubs. And apologies, we haven't had one for the last two meetings, including this one, because the Parks Police are no longer an entity, and we have reorganised the enforcement team in environment into one new team with additional staffing to create probably one of the largest environmental enforcement teams in the country, actually. So it all looks good going forward, and the team will cover green space as well as the housing estates and commercial and residential areas. And they have been responsive to my requests, certainly for coming on the weekend, Saturday mornings, we've had issues with cars, etc. So it's working well so far. There'll also be a ward representative on the LET, as they're called, the law enforcement team. There'll be an officer for each ward. I've asked Neil Furlow, who's the head of this service, who is the one for Old Oak Common and the Scrubs, so we know we have a name for that, and I'll circulate that as soon as I get it. There have been a lot of training going on, and there's certainly a lot more resident focused, and they are keen to engage with residents to find out what's going on the ground, but also they have an email as well where we can report things directly to them, which is in the papers, which is let.hf capitals at lbhf.gov.uk. So they're keen to get as much intelligence from residents as possible and working together on it. So that's the update on that, and I've made Neil aware that we expect some stats and updates on what's happening on the scrubs going forward, which he's agreed to, and we'll do a 6-monthly report to the next meeting.
Lovely, thank you. Do you think Neil would actually come along to the next meeting just to introduce himself to the committee so we can put a face to the name?
Yes, I'm sure he would. As I say, they're very much resident focused, the new team. So yes, I'll invite Neil. That
would be good, and it would be good to know what work they have planned, just to make sure that they're really visible in the community, so people know who to access and reach out to. Lovely. I'm aware we've skipped over some items in the agenda, so we'll come back to those in the manager's report. But Stephen, do you have a question on or comment on community safety update?
On the law enforcement team, told, and I don't know if this is right, Steve, or not, that they're not available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that there is no telephone number for them. And these are both thought to be serious shortcomings by those who made those comments to me.
Right, I'm not aware about the exact timings. They're certainly 7 days a week, but probably not overnight. But I can clarify that, and Neil can clarify that. And yes, they don't have somebody manning a phone, but staffing a phone, but they have got that email and say staff are on during their working hours, which I believe is the majority of the working day going through into the evening. But I can clarify exactly those hours, or Neil can when he comes.
That's helpful, and I think what would also be helpful, Steve, is maybe just some clarity that we could send out via the Friends about what should be sent to the LET team and what should be just sent to the police directly. I think when there are things happening on the scrubs, there's sometimes some fear to go directly to the police themselves in case of wasting police time. But I think obviously there are incidents that happen that do need police attention. So I think maybe just having a bit of a breakdown about who deals with what and what's appropriate to report to which team would be helpful.
And also, just to second what Stephen said, sort of giving people options for communicating with them and a good understanding of when they will be out and about. If there's not someone manning the phones, are they all out and about, and where people can find them? And then lastly, whether they should be sort of added into or have a separate sort of, you know, something like the Hammersmith and Fulham Report It app.
Yeah.
So, Steve, if you're happy to take that away and then send around an email before the next meeting.
If you would send something that we can share with all the friends, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, if I can take us back to item 6 on the manager's report, the catering concession.
Oh yes, apologies, Chair. It's the catering concession. I can just cover this quickly. We are moving ahead with that, but because of step 4 has been pushed back until the 19th of July, across all parks in Hammersmith and Fulham, we're not introducing concessions which takes up space in our parks, to keep them free for residents for informal recreation, really. So to be consistent, we're just holding off until step 4 across all the parks, if the committee are content with that.
Thank you. Stephen?
Yes, absolutely content with that. The comment has been made, firstly, extreme concern about extra litter risk, which I'm sure is everybody's aware of. But secondly, that there is a catering facility adjacent to the outdoor gym on the northern side of Linford Christie. And why bring in a van when you can perfectly well use a facility that exists already very close to where the van would presumably park, taking up space. I just wanted to share that thought with officers.
Chair, if I can come back on that, is the catering associated with the baseball you're referring to?
No, no, not at all. There is a catering facility inside the Linford Christie Stadium, which was operated as a community cafe by, I think, Martin Murphy about 2 or 3 years ago, at weekends only, which is probably when the demand is there. And why not use the facility that's there rather than bringing in a commercial caterer, or at least considering it.
Thank you, Stephen. So I don't know if you remember this conversation that we had at it was either the last committee or the one before, but the woman, the woman who was running the van is a local resident who is very committed to kind of running a community-focused coffee van, which had the committee's approval, because I think we're all very conscious of litter. And when we were having conversations with her from the off, that was the #1 concern we raised and said, you know, how on earth are we going to manage this? So this is why, Steve, I believe we're only doing this as a trial to see how it goes, aren't we? And yeah, and then we'll make an assessment call after that point. I think it's open air, so I mean, it won't mean people, and it can be open at different hours. I think it feels like there will be quite a lot of demand during the day from hospital workers in that area as well, which was something else that we discussed. So as I say, we're doing it as a trial, see how it goes. We're very mindful of the litter, but we'll keep that under review. Heather, your hand popped up and then it popped down. Was there something that you wanted to add to that? And then I'll go to Councillor Rowbottom.
It did, yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, it did pop up and pop down. No, those points that I was going to raise have been covered. So,
thank you.
Nothing further.
Thank you. Whichever site we decide to do, I think we decided it would be nice for there to be coffee vans, but I wonder whether we can strike some sort of balance and mitigate litter by having some sort of scheme where you get a discount if you bring your own coffee cart, which I think people have, you know, behaviour changed into with, you know, shops, etc., encouraging that, or eco-friendly materials. I don't know. I just wonder. I think it probably needs to be in line with our vision. So maybe we can try and mitigate some of that from the off and have that as part of our negotiation.
I think that's a very good point. I'm sure we can have those conversations. I think she's very much a sole trader, so it's not a kind of a big organisation that we'd be doing this with. So there might be limitations on what discounts could be if rubbish was brought back. But I think there's absolutely conversations that we could have. Lovely. Okay. Item 7, implementing strategic governance review recommendations.
Yes, Chair. This is myself again. As you recall, part of that governance review was to have a trust manager for a 2-year period, and we did progress with interviews at the end of May with some candidates. Unfortunately, none of the candidates were successful on the day, and the panel who interviewed, which include the chair and Miriam, we thought we should, from the people we got, we thought we should just review the job description and make it more outward facing, with greater focus on community engagement and development. And that the people who want to apply, we would expect them to have an interest in ecology and what happens on the scrubs. And therefore we want to update the person spec to reflect that as well. It's not to say that the candidates we had weren't excellent in certain areas. It was just that we didn't have anybody who we felt was sort of fitted the sort of ethos of the scrubs and what we're trying to do. So with your agreement, I'll update the job description and person specification and re-advertise, Chair.
Yes, I think that's very wise. Councillor Rowbottom, is that a legacy hand, or would you like to?
This is a new hand.
New hand, lovely. All right.
Point. I'd be happy to be involved in redrafting. I feel probably that there are lots of people who would. I think it's an interesting job. I wonder how we've worded it previously to make it not, or whether it's the channels that we've advertised it on. But I'm happy to put some thought into that, or help breathe some life into the wording, or whatever needs to happen. So feel free to loop me in if that's helpful.
Lovely, thank you. That's kind. I imagine the JD and person spec will come to me anyway, so I'm very happy to share that for any other thoughts. Lovely, thank you. Right, we have done community safety updates. So number 9, grounds maintenance and site management update.
Yes, Chair. So Heather's going to speak to this because it's mainly about the road and what's happened there.
Yeah, okay. Yes, thank you. Yeah, this was mentioned earlier in the meeting. The main resurfacing of the access road from Scrubs Lane in the direction of the depot and the pony centre, that took place in April, so that has now been resurfaced. So that is a considerable improvement. There is a second phase of works which we are still working on, and that includes the removal of the defunct traffic management system at the junction with Scrubs Lane. So that is ongoing. The second point to that is that traffic management along that access road is obviously becoming more of an issue. Certainly think since facilities have started unlocking. So there's more use of the stadium and more use of the sports pitches. So last week I did actually meet with a security firm. So we met and we had a walk around the site. We had a look at what was there already. I tried to describe what we might require from a traffic management system to them. They've taken that away and they're going to draft up costs for a couple of options. So that would either be to replace a rising curb system, which is similar to what we've had already. Though I would say that would be from a different manufacturer and a completely new system, or rising bollards. So that's another option. So I'm currently waiting for this firm to get back to me, and when I do have those details, I will get back to you, because I do feel that needs further discussion. I mean, what I would say is that the traffic management system, which is currently there, which is the old rising curve, that hasn't worked for a number of years, and I think any new system would certainly need a proper maintenance package along with it. But certainly the technology's moved on, I think, since the last time we put this system in. So as I say, I'm waiting for the next stage of that. So anyone got anything on that, Chair, or shall I move on to my last point?
Any questions on grounds maintenance and site management on the road? I mean, I think we are all aware that there has been increasing traffic onto the scrubs and people driving on. So anything that we can do to control that as quickly as possible feels important. But yeah, bringing options to the next committee would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, will do.
Any other comments or questions on that point before we move on to signage? No, I think not. Fine.
I did have an extra point, Chair, which was that several trees have been marked up for back boxes. I think there's about 15 back boxes going in around the site. So some of the trees which have been marked are actually marked for back boxes.
That's great. Good. I'm excited to see the back boxes go in. Is there anything else on trees or anything else that we should?
On the trees, there are some upcoming works. There is one scheduled tree fell, which we've been advised by the council's tree officer. That's actually a dead cherry tree at the northern end of the site. It's in the woodland, and it's actually leaning over the tent of the lone protester. That is going to need to be felled for health and safety reasons, fairly obviously, and the protester will have to be asked to move on a temporary basis while that work is done. That should be coming up in the next month or so. And there are also a couple of canopy reductions, substantial canopy reductions to a couple of sycamores. One is adjacent to the High Speed 2 SBS compound, and the other is adjacent to Braybrook Street, at the west end of Braybrook Street. Both trees have been inspected. They're in a very poor state of health, so a canopy reduction would give them a chance to recover. Having said that, they may not recover, but this is the only chance really they've got. And saying that will be happening in the next month or so.
Thank you. That's helpful to understand. And as I say, looking forward to the back boxes going up. And I know we've talked about potentially having signage in the future if we're marking trees for back boxes, so people know to look out for them. Lovely. Thank you. And that brings me neatly on to signage.
Signage. Yes, Chair, that's me. Right, the large signs have been cleaned, so we can actually see what's on them. So that's I hope that's good news. Also, the temporary signage around the meadow area went in a couple of weeks ago, so that is certainly to be welcomed. We are expecting to take them out at the end of the bird nesting season and then reinstall them early next spring. A colleague has let me know that there are several of these that look like they've been interfered with, shall we say, and start to be pushed over, which I think is disappointing, really, because it's fairly clear that they are official signs, and really all other temporary signs around the scrubs have been taken away by now. So I don't think there's any doubt that it feels like it's a deliberate act. So it's disappointing, but the signs are up.
Yeah, that's really disappointing. I wonder, Stephen and Miriam, if there's anything that we could do via the Friends just to encourage, because presumably at this point it's starting to verge on criminal damage if it's formal council signage that's up and people are willfully pushing them over, damaging them. Stephen and Miriam, if there's anything that we can do.
Certainly communicate that to the Friends in our note about this meeting. And just while we're on signage, so will it be the permanent signage that goes in next spring, or is that being done in conjunction with the master plan, or where are we on that?
I would expect the permanent signage to run alongside the master plan. Right. There may be a case for disengaging that if the master plan is perhaps running a little bit later than we would originally expect. So I think maybe that's to be discussed, because I think there is, having had a walk around with various residents and friends last week, there is clearly an appetite for further signage on the scrubs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lovely, thank you, Heather. Is there anything else on signage before we move on? Good, marvellous, thank you, Heather. Okay, number 11, Notting Hill Carnival.
Yes, Chair, this was an access request from the police, but I'm sure you're aware that the carnival has since been cancelled, so yeah.
Fine. Okay, that's fairly simple then. 12, Network Rail Depot.
Yes, Chair, I was going to deal with this. Yes, North Pole Open Space, which of course is part of Wormwood Scrubs. Network Rail have actually requested an area of North Pole space to be used as a compound for their works to the embankment, the rail embankment. For the past 18 months, EDF have actually been occupying part of the site as part of their works. I think it actually went on the agenda as FM Conway, and that's an error. I do apologise for that. So EDF have finally moved their compound off, and Network Rail have requested that the trust consider whether they would allow a compound on this site. We have got some information from Network Rail, but not a lot at the moment. This came up just before the agenda was published, so we're at an early stage of this. It does look at the moment like it's going to be quite a busy site, and of course North Pole's not a hugely large site in the first place, so there would be storage of materials, there'll be vehicles in and out, deliveries, and some temporary buildings on the site as well for office and welfare facilities. So I would, if you would like to consider that, then we'd be interested in your thoughts. Obviously, we can start negotiating a lease with them. I don't know whether the trust feels that's appropriate or not.
I think my instinct with this is that I'd like rather more information on it before we were in a position to make any more decision on it. Obviously, it's been in heavy use for a while. I think it'd be pertinent to know what the impact would be of this further request for usage, if there would be buildings, if there would be, what the work would look like. I mean, to the flip side, what compensation would be available for it, but I'd really like to know what resident impact will be for the site before I think we can make a decision. Does this need, I'm just looking at the fact they've requested it from August the 1st, so does this need to be a committee decision, and could we arrange talk about this by email offline?
Yeah, it isn't long till August the 1st, is it? I think perhaps we should take this offline. I think in the first instance, we will try and get some further information from Network Rail. That seems to be the next step, doesn't it? And request that, yeah, swiftly.
Sorry, can I just ask a quick question? And maybe I'm being very dense, but precisely where is this area? This is up where the UK power networks have little.
It's the other side of Scrubs Lane. So North Pole Open Space is separated from Wormwood Scrubs by a main road, but it is part of the common land, and it is managed as part of Wormwood Scrubs.
It's immediately north of North Pole Road. It's a small green area.
Yes.
Between Scrubs Lane and the new flats, which are horribly close to the railway.
Yes.
I
have to say that's never been on any map. I mean, I all of the maps I've ever seen, I mean, this we can discuss this separately, but that's not marked on any of the maps of Wormwood Scrubs as being part of it.
No, but it is.
Indeed, it is part of the common land. Yes, so the boundary of the Scrubs actually does incorporate North Pole Open Space.
Could I ask, Chair, if EDF have been paying, and if Network Rail would expect to pay whatever the rate should be?
I'm not aware of the details of that, Stephen.
But we will find that out and circulate that. I assume Network Rail would pay us for using the site, and I hope EDF have been paying us. But
because the reason I'm sort of, I don't recall our ever having had a discussion about EDF using the site and how much they would pay.
No, I'm not sure. Let's find out. Let's find out about that and circulate that as quickly as possible.
And maybe over time adjust our maps.
Yeah. Fine. Okay. Grounds maintenance contract. Steve, is this you?
Yes, it is, Chair. Thank you. Yes, so we're in the middle of the tender process. We've been out to tender. We've had some initial tenders back for the Scruggs lot, which is standalone, as you're aware. And now we can move into contractor negotiations with them. It's really about clarity and driving down cost and improving quality, really. So it's an opportunity for them to sharpen their pencils, if you like, and to make sure that they haven't missed anything out that they were expecting, and they understand exactly what we want. So that is proposed for week beginning the 5th of July, and it would be suggest it would be good to have members of the committee involved with that negotiation, so you can ask the potential contractors directly what you wish. So that's where we are, and we'll send out invites to yourself and Miriam, Chair.
I think we've already got the invite. It would also be very helpful to see any sort of initial tender or more recent bid submissions, paperwork from the two who are still in the process ahead of those meetings, rather than flying blind.
Agreed. Slightly irritatingly, Miriam, I can't make that date, so I think people are trying to find a new date to accommodate me. So apologies for that. But yes, I think having papers in advance would be helpful.
Going back to the minutes where I said it was Miriam as well as Emma, this should be Emma as well as Miriam, and yourself, of course, Chair. But I have a more substantive point. It says in the notes that final tenders will be expected to be returned around 16th of August, and approval to appoint the winning tender is timetabled for October, whereas the Charitable Trust meeting is in mid-September. And this must be the most important single thing that the Charitable Trust is going to do, and it surely shouldn't be done without being brought to the Charitable Trust, either at its September meeting or at a special meeting for the purpose, which, going back to the timetabling of the master plan, with a bit of luck, might even be approval of a revised consulted on master plan in October.
Well, so the next trust meeting, I think, is the 3rd of September, top of my head. So the 16th of August is not long before that, so perhaps we could delay that final tender date. Oh no, so sorry, final tender to then be invited, expect to be returned around the 16th of August. That's the deadline for them to return. And then approval to appoint will be October. So presumably we could do that at the September meeting. So I'm flying blind here, Steve. So is the plan there actually that it will come to committee and it says October, but actually that refers to the September meeting?
Yes, Chair. I think we can get it to the September meeting. Yeah, for your approval.
Great, thank you. I'm happy with that. Lovely. Okay. 13, play equipment and Braybrook Street.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. This is back to Heather.
Yes, thank you. Okay, we are recommending that the Trust submit a bid to High Speed 2's Community Fund for some new play equipment at Braybrook Street. I presume you're aware there were various items of equipment which were removed last year due to health and safety concerns. The posts are timber, were timber, and had started to show signs of rot beneath the ground, so they were removed as unsafe. High Speed 2 are inviting bids from groups and local authorities up and down the route. Hammersmith and Fulham is a priority area, so I think this bid would be welcomed. I have started to think about this already. When we had the walkabout last week, I did talk to several people who walked around the site with us. I've started to get a picture of what might be required. I've also made contact with a school, and they've actually started doing some consultation for us. So if the trust would like to approve that, the council would be happy to offer some time and some project management time and assistance in the bid.
I would be very happy with that. I know it's in the CapEx budget for next year. The park would be great if we can get it sorted sooner, or with more budget than we were able to allocate to make something even better on site. So I'm very pro this. Councillor Rowbottom.
Thank you. Just to say, this community fund, I wondered what the scope of it was and whether there's anything else, if we're a priority area, if there's anything else that we could apply to it for, and whether we can maybe have that as an action to explore in tandem with the consultation or the many initiatives we're trying to set up.
I'm sure there are. I currently have a list of about 5 projects I'm hoping to hit them up for, so I think we definitely can. Yes, but I think we can certainly see what we can get. Lovely. So is that approved by the committee? Good, thank you. Okay, item 14.
Yes, Chair, this is the car parking charges. So a traffic order needs to be in place before we can actually start charging. So there's been a bit of a delay, but I'm told that will be in place by August. It's just an update really on where we are.
Thank you. And we're running this as a trial, aren't we? Or is this something in perpetuity now?
That's right, yes. It is a trial.
Yeah, good.
Withdraw it.
I think there was concern about what impact this would have on parking on the estate. So I think let's just keep that under review. But good, thank you for the update. Fine. Okay. Events, no events?
Yes, no events. So again, linked to concessions, events won't happen until step 4. So none on to report. And then moving on to 16. So we've had a successful working relationship with HMA McIntyre Hudson, our current auditors. They certainly came in at a better price than the previous year, and so we're proposing that we would appoint them again for the 2020-21 accounts.
Thank you. I'm happy with that. Good. Lots of nodding there.
Good. Thank you. I'm hoping Carmen is here to take any questions on the accounts. I'm just trying to see her and the participant.
Yes, Chair, I am here for any questions.
Great, Carmen. Thank you.
Thank you. Carmen, do you just want to take us through the accounts?
Yes, I can do.
Thank you.
What I've presented is the actual outturn for 2021. At the last meeting, the forecast was for a surplus of 31,000, and that was mainly because of the uncertainty of the parking. But the actual outturn was 49,439, so 17,000 better than originally forecasted. And so that means that the trust funds have increased by a further 17,000. So that is what I presented first. I've then presented also at the last meeting the budget for 21-22, and that was pretty much in line with the 2021 outturn at the time, but it was 75,000. That included the project manager. So it was intended to be a 31,595 surplus budget for 21-22, but as there were a number of proposals that were agreed the last time, that outturn has now turned into a deficit. So it was 31,595 surplus that was approved, but because of these three items, firstly, the asbestos removal of 103,320, which was approved, and that has been paid. We've also got the roadway improvements of 40,000, and those are underway, as Heather has said, and also the bird and bat boxes were 1950. So those three changes came up to 145,270, and so the revised budget is 113,675 deficit. So that reduces the overall funds of the trust. So at the moment, subject to audit, the 21-22 accounts, sorry, the 2021 accounts will deliver, well, the trust's funds would be 5,938,832, and the revised budget, rather than a 5,974,227, it would be leaving the trust with funds of 5,825,157. So its usable funds would be 825,156 after all of those items have been spent. So that is the proposed budget. So you're still left with 825,000 funds, including the post and all of those works. Not the additional work, costs that could possibly come about from any of these discussions today. So that could be further reduced, depending on the costs that come forward and are agreed by the trust. So that was just an overall summary. If anyone's got any questions?
Thank you, Carmen. I can see Councillor Rowbottom's hand is up.
Oh, thank you. It's not about the nitty-gritty of the numbers presented. It's more to sort of reflect on that. I know that, so I suppose the headline is it's given the circs not as bad as it could have been, which is no one's fault. I suppose I wonder what the trajectory is. As you said, Carmen, there are still some things at play around some decisions we discussed tonight about certain aspects of spend, so it's fluctuating a bit. But broadly, wonder, how when we want to consider making up a shortfall or building that into our trajectory for subsequent years, just a kind of forward look rather than retrospective.
Well, what I would say is that this budget has been set fairly cautiously as before. It doesn't factor in any additional costs for the weekend parking, so that could be a bonus. And one item that I've highlighted is the actual parking for March was actually 10,000 more than projected, because I was projecting 17,000, because that was what it was in December, I believe, but it came in at 27,000, and that's even before weekend parking. So somehow that's been boosted. I'm not quite sure if it's a one-off. So potentially parking could return to the levels of prior years, because we were achieving 351 in 18, 19, 19, 20, which obviously had March as the COVID start, was 324, and I'm forecasting just 300 in the budget. So yeah, if it picks back up to its normal level, then there's potential for it to be exceeded because of weekend parking, but obviously we're only bringing that in on a trial basis. So yes, and then also the post of the project manager is included at 75,000. there, and that's just for a couple of years. So you'll have that to fall back on after that post goes. So
great, thank you. I mean, it wasn't specific to you. It's more just sort of, but that's very useful to have. It's more collectively. We maybe just need to think about. It's very hard to say at the moment, obviously, because the restrictions, things are still in flux with restrictions. I totally get it. Commercial opportunities.
Yes.
So it's impossible to say. I'm more just an action that we put it on a future agenda once things are settled a bit more. Who knows when that?
Yes.
That just to put that, almost for the benefit of the minutes, just to know that's an action.
Yes. I'll take that into account. Thank you.
The only other point I would make on that is, I would assume and expect that the new grounds maintenance contract on a separate carve-out basis is going to cost substantially less than the old one.
And that is a possibility also, because that will be reduced as well. So that will increase the funds as well. So because what I've done at the moment is just keep it at current levels, but we are going through that tender process, and that is a high possibility that will happen.
Thank you, Carmen. Stephen.
I think that's exactly right, what Miriam just said. The predecessors, or possibly predecessors but one, to the current officers managing the scrubs for us, were very clear to us that the allocation of costs to the scrubs was disproportionately high when it was done, now a long time ago. And therefore the standalone costs should show us a combination, as Steve has already said, of better service and lower cost. So let's hope that's achieved. And also going back to what I was saying earlier about pony centre income, maybe there'll be a bonus of back year's pony centre income plus whatever it comes to. So I think this budget is a very reasonable budget with all the uncertainties that Carmen has helpfully drawn our attention to.
Thank you. All right, this is just for the committee to note. So are there any other questions before we move on from this item? All right, thank you so much, Carmen. Okay, I think that concludes the manager's report and takes us on to AOB. I have one item of AOB, but does anyone else have any AOB that they'd like to bring forward at this point?
I have, well, it's sort of one point with sort of, I guess, several subheadings, which is, I think there's still a sort of, well, in fact, I don't think that there's still a sort of wish from the Friends for more and sort of better communication. And I recognise this is a sort of work in progress, and obviously, as Heather suggested, having signs on the bat boxes would be one thing, or an announcement as to when the bat boxes, go live. This was specifically raised with relation to, I think, some new sort of wooden path edging has gone in that was done by some volunteers, and I think that relates to the forest school. I'm not quite sure. And then also there was this sort of question, which I think Stephen has raised previously in an email, about these sort of signs going up saying it's going to be a forest school, dogs on leads in this area. I think there were concerns about both of those things. Obviously, we're very pro-forest schools, but this is just a point about communication.
Thank you. Heather and I did have a bit of a chat about this just beforehand, and we've agreed that this is an area where we could do a bit of work. So why don't we take that away and think about what we feel is a kind of a manageable and sustainable way for us to make sure that we are effectively communicating what's happening, that's going on, so that we all know what's happening at relevant points.
Thank you very much. And can I just say that it is getting better. There is room for its improvement. But if any of the officers concerned want to share information, and I'm not talking about consultation or formal or informal, but just this is what's happening, we thought you'd like to know. If they send it to me or to Sarah Johnson, who they all know, it will get out to all the friends within a very short period. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you. I think that's definitely something that we can talk about and work on. Thank you. I have one fairly major piece of any business that comes forward, and that is that I've got a statement that I've been given to read, and that is that officers have advised me that HS2 have indicated that they're considering obtaining a compulsory purchase order, which would enable them to acquire the sewer works site and the UTX site on the scrubs for their works. The HS2 Act deadline for the HS2 works on the scrubs to be completed by is the 23rd of February 2022. HS2 have told officers that they estimate that as a result of delays, their works will not be completed before this deadline. The HS2 Act provides HS2 with the ability to compulsorily acquire parcels of land along their route where it is necessary to enable them to complete their works. The compulsory purchase order would enable HS2 to complete their works on the acquired land after the February 22 deadline expires. Once the works are finished, the land will then be returned to the Trust. Officers are considering this development and will provide an update to the Trust when more is known about the proposals. It almost goes without saying that we are deeply concerned about this latest development and are seeking professional advice from leading experts in this field as to what options are available to us, and will keep the Trust members and co-optees updated when we have more information. I have a whole load of thoughts on this, which we cannot go on to at the moment. As I say, we are looking at all options that are available to us, and we will reconvene in a few weeks or months once we've got those options, and we'll discuss them as a committee. Stephen.
I quite understand that you can't elaborate and answer questions because you're only just learnt this and you're taking legal advice. Could you please repeat the sentence that I think you said that when they finish their work, if they have compulsorily purchased the land, they have to give it back?
That's it. So our legal team have assured me this is the case, that once the works are finished, the land will be returned to the Trust. As I say, Belinda?
The wording seems a bit strange, compulsory purchase and returning. It seems a bit ambiguous.
So there will be a full briefing session on this for members of the Trust. I am by no means an expert in compulsory purchase orders, so I'm sort of reluctant to say any more. But as I understand it, the practice is once land has been compulsory purchased for a specific use, once that use has been fulfilled, it will then be returned. So, but as I say, there will be a full briefing session organised for members of the Trust.
I would just add, I mean, obviously it goes without saying that the Friends would be vehemently opposed to any compulsory purchase, and yeah, the land, if it goes ahead, then the land being returned is absolutely critical, and I'm sure you're all working very hard on this, but the more information we can have as soon as possible, the better.
Completely agreed on that. Indeed.
Yes.
So, as I say, we will reconvene as soon as we can, once we've got all the information available to us on this. I imagine we're all of a similar mindset that we are.
Yes, please do call another meeting as soon as you have the information.
All right, on that rather grim note, is there anything else before we draw the meeting to a close?
Not from me.
Okay, well, thank you very much everyone for your time this evening. I will see you perhaps sooner than expected than the September meeting, and see you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you.